Continuing on with the story of Mahākassapa, great disciples of the Buddha. Kassapa's relationship to the Buddha. We have already seen that there was a deep inner relationship between the Venerable Mahākassapa and the Buddha. This relationship, according to our traditional sources, had its root in their past lives. According to the Jataka stories, Kassapa was connected with the Bodhisattva in 19 existences, frequently through a close family bond. No less than 6 times, Kassapa had been the Bodhisattva's father, twice his brother, and often his friend or teacher. As it was thus not their first meeting, we can understand why such an immediate and strong devotion and wholehearted dedication toward the Master arose in Kassapa's heart at the first sight of him. From Kassapa's final life, many conversations are reported between the Buddha and his great disciple. It happened on 3 occasions that the Master spoke to him. Exhort the monks, Kassapa, give them a discourse on the Dhamma. Kassapa, either I, Kassapa, should exhort the monks or you. Either I or you should give them a discourse on the Dhamma. These words imply a high recognition of Kassapa's ability, because not every arhat has the capacity to expound the teaching well and effectively. The commentary raises here the question why it was Mahākassapa who was placed by the Buddha on such a high footing in this respect, and not Sariputta or Mahamoggallana. The Buddha did so, says the commentary, because he knew that Sariputta and Moggallana would not survive him, but Kassapa would, and he wanted to bolster Kassapa's stature before the other monks so they would consider him one whose advice was to be heeded. On 3 occasions when the Buddha requested Kassapa to exhort the monks, he refused to comply. On the first of these occasions, Kassapa said that it had now become difficult to speak to some of the monks. They were not amenable to advice, were untractable, and did not accept admonitions with respect. He had also heard that 2 monks had been boasting of their skill in preaching, saying, "Come, let us see who will preach more profusely, more beautifully, and at greater length." When the Buddha was informed about this by Kassapa, he had these monks summoned and gave them a stern lecture, making them give up their childish conceit. That's from Samyutta Nikaya 16:6, if anybody wants to look at it. Hence, we can see that Kassapa's negative report turned out to be of positive benefit to those monks. It was not done just for the sake of criticizing others. On the second occasion, too, Kassapa did not wish to instruct the monks because they were not amenable to admonishment, lacked faith in the good, lacked a sense of shame and fear of wrongdoing, and were slack and devoid of wisdom. Kassapa compared such monks in their state of decline to the waning moon, which daily loses in beauty, in beauty, which is for confidence, in roundness, which is for shame, in splendor, fear of wrongdoing, in height, which is a synonym for energy, and in width, metaphor for wisdom. On still the 3rd occasion, the Buddha asked Kassapa to instruct the monks, and Kassapa again expressed his reluctance for the same reason as before. It seems that this time, too, the Buddha did not urge Kassapa to change his mind, but he himself spoke of the reasons for their conduct. Formerly, Kassapa, there were elders of the order who were forest dwellers, living on alms food, wearing rag robes, using only the set of 3 robes, having few wants and being contented, living secluded and aloof from society, energetic, and they praised and encouraged such a way of life. When such elders visited a monastery, they were gladly welcomed and honored as being dedicated to the practice of the Dhamma. Then the younger monks would also strive to emulate them in their way of life, and this would be of great benefit to them for a long time. But nowadays, Kassapa, those who are honored when visiting a monastery are not monks of austere and earnest life, but those who are well known and popular and are amply provided with the requisites of a monk. These are welcomed and honored, and the younger monks try to emulate them, which will bring them harm for a long time. Hence, one will be right in saying that such monks are harmed and overpowered by what does harm to a monk's life. On another occasion, Kassapa asked the Buddha, "What is the reason that formerly there were fewer rules, but more monks were established in the knowledge of arhatship, while now there are more rules, but fewer monks are established in the knowledge of arhatship?" The Buddha replied, "So it happens, Kassapa, when beings deteriorate and the true Dhamma vanishes, then there are more rules and fewer arhants. There will be, however, no vanishing of the true Dhamma until a sham Dhamma arises in the world. But when a sham Dhamma arises in the world, then the true Dhamma vanishes. But, Kassapa, it is not a cataclysm of the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, that makes the true Dhamma disappear, nor is the reason for its disappearance similar to the overloading of a ship that causes it to sink. It is rather the presence of 5 detrimental attitudes that causes the obscuration and disappearance of the true Dhamma. These are the 5. It is the lack of respect and regard for the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the training and meditative concentration on the part of monks and nuns and male and female lay devotees. But so long as there is respect and regard for those 5 things, the true Dhamma will remain free of obscuration and will not disappear." Other discourses relating to Mahākassapa deal chiefly with his austere way of life, which was highly praised and commended by the Buddha. But on one occasion late in his ministry, the Buddha reminded Kassapa that as he had now grown old, he must find his coarse, worn-out rag robes irksome to use. Therefore, the Buddha suggested he should now wear robes offered by householders, accept invitations for alms offerings, and live near him. But Kassapa replied, "For a long time I have been a forest dweller, going on alms round and wearing rag robes, and such a life I have commended to others. I have had few wants, lived contented, secluded, applying strenuous energy, and that too I have commended to others." When the Buddha asked, "But for what reason do you live in this way?" Kassapa replied, "For 2 reasons, for my own pleasant abiding here and now, and out of compassion for later generations of monks who, when they hear about such a life, might think to emulate it." Then the Buddha said, "Well spoken, Kassapa, well spoken. You are living for the happiness of many, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit and welfare of gods and humans. You may then keep to your coarse rag robes, go out for alms, and live in the forest." "This our Kassapa," said the Buddha, "is satisfied with whatever robes, alms food, lodging, and medicine he obtains. For the sake of these, he will not do anything that is unbefitting for a monk. If he does not obtain any of these requisites, he is not perturbed, and when he obtains them, he makes use of them without clinging or infatuation, not committing any fault, aware of possible dangers and knowing them as an escape. By the example of Kassapa, or by one who equals him, I will exhort you, monks. Thus exhorted, you should practice in the same way." The Buddha also mentioned that Mahākassapa was exemplary in his relationship to the laity. When going among the families on his alms round or on invitation, he did not think wishfully, "May people give amply and give things of quality. May they give quickly and respectfully." He had no such thoughts, but remained detached, like the moon that sheds its mild light from a distance. And this is from the suttas. When Kassapa goes among families, his mind is not attached, not caught up, not fettered. He rather thinks, "Let those who want gain acquire gain. Let those who want merit do merit." He is pleased and glad at the gains of others, just as he is pleased and glad at his own gains. Such a monk is fit to go among families. When he preaches the Dhamma, he will not do so for the sake of personal recognition and praise, but for letting them know the teaching of the Exalted One, so that those who hear it may accept it and practice accordingly. He will preach because of the excellence of the teaching and out of compassion and sympathy. But the strongest recognition of Mahākassapa's achievements, the highest praise given him by the Buddha, came when the Master said that Kassapa could attain at will, just as he himself could, the 4 fine material and 4 immaterial meditative absorptions, the cessation of perception and feeling, and could also attain the 6 supernormal knowledges, the abhinyas, which include the supernormal powers and cultivate in the attainment of nibbana. Here his powerful meditative achievements, akin to those of the Buddha, appear as a characteristic trait of Mahākassapa's mind. It was because of that deep meditative calm that he could adapt himself, unperturbed, to all external situations and live as one of few wants, materially and socially. In his verses, preserved in the Thera, Mahākassapa praises again and again the peace of the jhanas. He was one who went from abundance to abundance. In his lay life, he had lived in the abundance of wealth and harmony. As a monk, he dwelt in the abundance of jhanic experience, furthered by his former life in the Brahma world. While in some of the texts he appears to be very severe, this should not lead us to believe that he was harsh by nature. When he occasionally rebuked others in stern words, he did so for pedagogical reasons, in order to help them. This we shall see especially when we deal with his relationship to Ananda. His relations with fellow monks. One as dedicated to the meditative life as the Venerable Mahākassapa, was, cannot be expected to have been eager to accept and train many pupils, and in fact, the canonical texts mention only a few pupils of his. One of Kassapa's few recorded discourses, addressed to the monks, deals with the subject of overestimating one's attainments. Quote, "There may be a monk who declares he has attained to the highest knowledge, that of arhantship. Then the master, or a disciple capable of knowing the minds of others, examines and questions him. When they question him, that monk becomes embarrassed and confused. The questioner now understands that the monk has made this declaration through overrating himself out of conceit. Then, considering the reason for it, he sees that this monk has acquired much knowledge of the teaching and proficiency in it, which made him declare his overestimation of himself to be the truth. Penetrating the mind of that monk, he sees that he is still obstructed by the 5 hindrances and has stopped halfway while there is still more to do." Unquote. That's Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Tens, Sutta 86. Apart from the few instances where Mahākassapa is speaking to unnamed monks or a group of monks, the texts record only his relationship to Sariputta and Ananda. 2 conversations between Mahākassapa and Sariputta have been recorded in the Kassapa Samyutta. On both occasions, it was in the evening, after meditation, that Sariputta went to see Mahākassapa. In the first text, Sariputta asked, "It has been said, friend Kassapa, that without ardor and without fear of wrongdoing, one is incapable of gaining enlightenment, incapable of attaining nibbana, incapable of attaining highest security, but that with ardor and with fear of wrongdoing, one is capable of such attainments. Now, in how far is one incapable of such attainments, and in how far is one capable of them? When, friend Sariputta, a monk thinks, if bad and unwholesome states that have so far not arisen in me were to arise, this would bring me harm. And if then he does not arouse ardor and fear of wrongdoing, then he is lacking in ardor and fear of wrongdoing. When he thinks, if bad and unwholesome states that have now arisen in me are not abandoned, this would bring me harm. Or, if unarisen wholesome states were not to arise, this would bring me harm. Or, if arisen wholesome states were to vanish, this would bring me harm. If on these occasions, too, a monk does not arouse ardor and fear of wrongdoing, then he is lacking these qualities, and lacking them, he is incapable of attaining enlightenment, incapable of attaining nibbana, incapable of attaining the highest security. But if a monk on these 4 occasions for right effort arouses ardor and fear of wrongdoing, he is capable of attaining enlightenment, capable of attaining nibbana, capable of attaining the highest security. That was Samyutta Nikaya 16.2. On another occasion, Sariputta asked Mahākassapa whether the Tathagata, the perfect one, exists after death or does not exist, or both exists and does not exist, or neither exists nor does not exist. In each case, Mahākassapa replied, "This was not declared by the Blessed One. And why not? Because it is of no benefit and does not belong to the fundamentals of the holy life. Because it does not lead to disenchantment, nor to dispassion, cessation, inner peace, direct knowledge, enlightenment, and nibbana." But what, friend, did the Blessed One declare? This is suffering. So, friend, has the Blessed One declared. This is the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the way to the cessation of suffering. So, friend, has the Blessed One declared. And why? Because it conduces to benefit and belongs to the fundamentals of the holy life, because it leads to turning away from worldliness, to dispassion, cessation, inner peace, direct knowledge, enlightenment, and nibbana. The Mahāgosinga Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 32, records a group discussion led by the Venerable Sariputta, in which Mahākassapa, along with several other eminent disciples, once participated. At the time, these elders were residing in the Gosinga forest along with the Buddha, and on a clear moonlit night they approached Sariputta for a discussion on the Dhamma. Sariputta declared, "Delightful is this Gosinga sal tree forest. It is a clear moonlit night. The sala trees are in full bloom, and it seems as if celestial scents are being wafted around." Then he asked each distinguished elder in the group, Ananda, Revata, Anuruddha, Mahākassapa, and Mahamoggallana, what kind of monk could lend more luster to that forest. Mahākassapa, like the others, replied according to his own temperament. "Here, friend Sariputta, a monk is himself a forest dweller, and he speaks in praise of forest dwelling. He is himself an alms food collector, and speaks in praise of collecting alms food. He is himself a rag robe wearer, and speaks in praise of wearing rag robes. He is himself a triple robe wearer, and he speaks in praise of wearing the triple robe. He himself has few wishes, is content, secluded, and aloof from society, and he speaks in praise of each of these qualities. He himself has attained to virtue, to concentration, to wisdom, to liberation, and to knowledge and vision of liberation, and he speaks in praise of each of these attainments. This is the kind of monk who could lend more luster to this Gosinga sala tree forest." And then it relates some vignettes about Mahākassapa's relationship with Venerable Ananda. On the first occasion, Ananda asked Kassapa to accompany him to the nuns' quarters. Kassapa, however, refused and asked Ananda to go alone. But Ananda seemed to be intent on getting Kassapa to give a Dhamma talk to the nuns, and he repeated his request twice. Kassapa finally consented and went along. The result, however, turned out to be quite different from what Ananda had expected. After the discourse, one of the nuns, Tula Tissa by name, raised her voice to make a rather offensive remark. How could Master Kassapa presume to speak on the Dhamma in the presence of Master Ananda, the learned sage? This is as if a needle peddler wanted to sell a needle to the needle maker. Obviously, this nun preferred the gentle preaching of Ananda to Kassapa's stern and sometimes critical approach, which may have touched on her own weaknesses. When Kassapa heard the nun's remarks, he asked Ananda, "How is it, friend Ananda? Am I the needle peddler and you the needle maker? Or am I the needle maker and you the needle peddler?" Ananda replied, "Be indulgent, Venerable Sir. She is a foolish woman. Beware, friend Ananda, or else the Sangha may further investigate you. How is it, friend Ananda? Was it you whom the Exalted One extolled in the presence of the Sangha, saying, 'I, O monks, can attain at will the four fine material and immaterial meditative absorptions, the cessation of perception and feeling, the 6 supernormal knowledges, and Ananda too can so attain?' No, Venerable Sir. Or did he say, 'Kassapa too can so attain?'" So from the above account, we can see that Venerable Mahākassapa did not think that Ananda's conciliatory reply was adequate or did full justice to the situation. I'll skip forward here. Another conversation between Venerable Mahākassapa and Ananda arose on the following occasion. Once the Venerable Ananda went on a walking tour in the southern hills together with a large company of monks. This was at the time when 30 mostly young monks, pupils of Ananda, had given up the robe and had returned to the lay life. After Ananda had ended his tour, he came to Rajagaha and went to see the Venerable Mahākassapa. When he had saluted him and was seated, Kassapa said this, "What are the reasons, friend Ananda, for the sake of which the Blessed One had said that no more than 3 monks should take their alms meal among families?" "There are 3 reasons, Venerable Sir. It is for restraining ill-behaved persons, for the well-being of good monks, and out of consideration for the lay families." "Then, friend Ananda, why do you go on tour with those young new monks whose senses are unrestrained, who are not moderate in eating, not devoted to wakefulness? It seems you behave like one trampling the corn. It seems you destroy the faith of the family of the families. Your following is breaking up. Your new starters are falling away. This youngster truly does not know his own measure. Gray hairs are now on my head, Venerable Sir, and still we cannot escape being called youngster by the Venerable Mahākassapa. This could have ended the matter, as Ananda did not deny that the reproach was justified. He objected only to the hurtful way in which Mahākassapa had expressed his censure. In response to the admonition, Ananda would have tried to keep his pupils under stricter discipline, but again, this matter was complicated by a nun, Tulananda, who along with Tulatissa was one of the black sheep of the Bhikkhuni Sangha. She had heard that Ananda had been called a youngster by the Venerable Mahākassapa, and full of indignation, she voiced her protest, saying that Kassapa had no right to criticize a wise monk like Ananda, as Kassapa had formerly been an ascetic of another sect. In that way, Tulananda diverted the matter of monastic discipline into personal detraction bordering on enmity, for as our earlier account has shown, Kassapa had originally gone forth as an independent ascetic, not as a follower of another school. Tulananda and Tulatissa soon left the order. When the Venerable Mahākassapa heard Tulananda's utterance, he said to Ananda, "Rash and thoughtless are the words spoken by Tulananda the nun. Since I left the home life, I have had no other teacher than the Blessed One, the Arhat, the fully enlightened one. Then he related the story of his first meeting of the Buddha. This is also in the Kassapa Samyutta. And we'll just end by reading some of the verses of Mahākassapa. One thing that's not related in here actually is also there is one time when Ananda was working all day teaching lay people, and Mahākassapa criticized him for this. And then some of Ananda's followers thought Ananda might be hurt by this, but then Ananda said, don't speak like that. Mahākassapa is my teacher, and he always, one of these beautiful parts of this relationship is that Ananda always considered Mahākassapa his teacher and didn't feel any sense of resentment or feeling criticized, or he didn't hold on to, he took the criticism from Mahākassapa, he always took it in a constructive way, so it's this wonderful kind of relationship. And then also Mahākassapa, in one point, he actually goes to the Buddha and says Ananda should be practicing, he shouldn't be teaching lay people all day. And the Buddha says, don't say that, Kassapa, don't say that. He says, Ananda has great merit. Merit is a synonym for happiness. So that's also quite a wonderful teaching that's actually not related in here. In the Theragatha, the verses of the elders, 40 verses are ascribed to the Venerable Mahākassapa. These stanzas mirror some of the great elders' characteristic qualities and virtues, his austere habits and his contentedness, strictness towards himself and his brother monks, his independent spirit and his self-reliance, his love of solitude and aloofness from crowds, his dedication to the practice of meditation and the peace of the jhanas. These verses also show what does not appear in the prose texts, his sensitivity to the beauty of nature that surrounded him. And this is an excerpt from some of those 40 verses. Having come down from my mountain lodging, I entered the city to collect my alms. Courteously I came up to a man, a leper, who was eating a meal. With his hand all leprous and diseased, he offered me a morsel of food. As he placed the morsel in my bowl, a finger broke off and toppled in. I sat down at the base of a wall and ate the morsel he had given me. While I was eating and after I had finished, I did not feel the least disgust. Using leftover scraps as food, urine as medicine, the foot of a tree for one's lodging, and a robe made from cast-off rags, one who has gained mastery over these is truly a man everywhere at home. When Mahākassapa was asked why, at his advanced age, he still climbed daily up and down a mountain, he replied, "While some grow weary as they climb the steep slope of the rocky mountain, Kassapa ascends, buoyed by psychic power, the Buddha's air, aware and mindful. Having returned from his daily alms round, having climbed up the rocky mountain, Kassapa meditates free from clinging, with fear and trembling well abandoned. Having returned from his daily alms round, having climbed up the rocky mountain, Kassapa meditates free from clinging, quenched among those who burn with passion. Having returned from his daily alms round, having climbed up the rocky mountain, Kassapa meditates free from clinging, his task done, his cankers gone. People asked again why the Venerable Mahākassapa, at his age, wishes to live in forests and mountains. Does he not like monasteries such as the Bamboo Grove and others? And he responds in verses. Spread over with kareri garlands, these regions are delightful to my heart. Resounding with elephants, so lovely, these rocky mountains give me delight. With splendid hue of dark blue clouds, while streams are flowing cool and clear, covered with indigopaka insects, these rocky mountains give me delight. Like towering peaks of dark blue clouds, like lofty houses with gabled roofs, resounding with elephants, so lovely, these rocky mountains give me delight. Their lovely surfaces lashed by rain, the mountains are resorted to by seers. Echoing with the cries of peacocks, these rocky mountains give me delight. This is enough for me, desiring to meditate, enough for me, resolute and mindful. This is enough for me, a bhikkhu, resolute, desirous of the goal. This is enough for me, desiring comfort, a bhikkhu with a resolute mind. This is enough for me, desiring exertion, a stable one of resolute mind. They are like the blue blossoms of flax, like the autumn sky covered with clouds, with flocks of many kinds of birds. These rocky mountains give me delight. No crowds of layfolk visit these hills, but they are inhabited by herds of deer, with flocks of many kinds of birds. These rocky mountains give me delight. Wide gorges are there where clear water flows, haunted by monkeys and by deer. Covered by wet carpets of moss, these rocky mountains give me delight. The music of a five-piece ensemble can never give me so much delight as I derive when with one pointed mind I gain proper insight into the Dhamma. And in the following verses, the Venerable Mahākassapa voices his own lion's roar. As far as the range of this Buddha field extends, excepting the great sage himself, I am the foremost in ascetic virtues. One my equal cannot be found. The teacher has been served by me. The Buddha's teaching has been done. The heavy burden has been dropped. The conduit to becoming has been uprooted. Gautama the immeasurable does not cling to robe, to lodging, or to food. He is untainted like a spotless lotus, bent on renunciation beyond the three worlds. The foundations of mindfulness are his neck. The great sage has faith for his hands. Above his brow is perfect wisdom, nobly wise. He ever wanders with all desire quenched. And so that completes at least a little bit of a introduction to Mahākassapa and some of his teachings. And tomorrow we can continue with the Angulimala. We're left off in the middle of that previously. So, any questions, comments? A few minutes. One of the earliest to practice them. I mean, these practices were probably known about, but they aren't really codified so much in the suttas. The Buddha mentions them from time to time. They're more codified in the Visuddhimagga as 13 different practices, but I assume the Buddha was doing a lot of these things as he was practicing. And if Paul has any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they were